All right, so admittedly, I am, you know, a little bit of a loser, but I love finding cool little gadgets like this. And at first glance, it might not be immediately obvious what this thing is or what it does, but it's gotta be one of the coolest little things I found to come out of China recently. So this little unit, it claims to turn any old school mechanical shifter, so ones that use cables to brake, into a fully hydraulic disc brake system with proper dual piston brake calipers. But is this just another cheap, useless bike gadget you can get on AliExpress? Or could it like legitimately provide some decent disc brake performance? Well, today we're gonna flip in and figure it out together. My name, as always, is Luke, and yeah, welcome back to Trace Velo. Right, so as mentioned, this thing, it's a hydraulic converter. It means running a regular mechanical group set while having genuine hydraulic disc brakes and kind of all the benefits that entails. It's from this brand I'm relatively familiar with, IIIPro, or maybe 3Pro, and you know, it's cheap. This kit costs under 50 quid on AliExpress. That includes 2 converters, one for each shifter, and both brake calipers as well. And they're decently made. They're one-piece aluminium units, although worth noting, you have to run 160mm rotors front and back because of the way the calipers are designed. They don't support 140mm rotors, so bear that in mind. Okay, so let me demonstrate how this actually works quickly. So I'll remove this cosmetic cap, but basically, when you pull on the brake lever like so, you'll have the brake cable running through here, and it'll be attached to this via that grub screw, so it'll come out right there. Basically, when you pull on that lever, it's going to compress this piston, which is then going to compress the hydraulic fluid in here, and it's going to come out of this, which is then connected to that brake caliper at the disc, and that's how you stop. Now, this idea, it's nothing new actually. Giant made something quite similar back in 2016 called their Conduct SL system, and in fact, I used it on a gravel bike I built a few years back. This unit here, it would replace the faceplate on the front of a Giant stem. You'd feed the brake cables in either side, and then out the bottom you'd get hydraulic lines to run to the front and rear disc brakes. Now, at the time when it was released, it didn't get much love actually, because it was quite heavy and honestly pretty complicated to set up. For example, you needed a proprietary bleed kit for the unit to get it all sorted, so it was a little bit of a faff. But I've got to be honest, when I had it on the bike, I was really impressed with the braking performance. It was so close to like a genuine hydraulic group set. So as this 3Pro kit relies on pretty much the same principle, I've got a lot of hope the braking's gonna be decent actually. So let's get a bike built and I'll get this kit slapped on.
Righty-ho, so I'm using this carbon frame for the build. I've had it years. It's from a brand that I really like called OG-EVKIN, and importantly, the cables aren't fully integrated through the headset. They're exposed up at the front, so I've got space to get these converters installed. Now, I've got a set of old school mechanical shifters from this brand called Micro. Again, I've had these ages, used them many times before, and yeah, I really like them. And because they're Shimano compatible, they're being paired up with a set of 105 R7000 derailleurs.
Okay, so I've been having a kind of think about where I can actually mount these onto the front of the bike, right? Because with this giant conduct system here, it's obvious, right? You bang it on the front of the stem like so, the brake lines feed into each side, and then helpfully, the hoses come out the bottom here. So this is quite tidy, works quite well. With this 3Pro setup, you've got 2 separate items, right? So you can kind of position them wherever you want. My initial thought was to put them on the top of the stem, somewhere like that, because I think it would look quite cool, kind of keeps them out of the way. But then annoyingly, the lines, the hydraulic lines for the brakes, especially for the rear, it would need to kind of come out the back and then sort of feed round into this side of the frame. So it would be quite messy. I could run them in line, and I've seen a few people do that. So have the brake lines come in here, and then the hoses come out the backs, and they would kind of sit here. The trouble is, I figure that when you're riding along, they would kind of rattle and bump into each other, be quite noisy, so I don't think that's optimal. Basically, I think the only sensible option is to have them here, because then the brake lines will feed into the backs here, and then the hoses come out the bottom, so it'll be relatively straightforward to kind of feed them into the frame. So I figure that's probably where I'm going to get them mounted.
So let's get this thing built. I'm just getting those derailleurs slapped on here, and I want this to be my winter training bike. So yeah, I'm taking my time. I do want to get it all done properly. But while that's being sorted, started, if you're anything like me, you'll want to know what's inside this thing. So naturally, I took one apart. Specifically, I took this black cover off to see the oil reservoir system underneath. Interestingly, you can see it's split into 2 chambers, each with its own rubber diaphragm. Now, from my understanding, it works like this. The lower chamber, the one with this tiny pinhole called a timing port, it connects to the master cylinder underneath, keeps the system topped up with mineral oil as the brake pads wear down, and it equalizes the fluid pressure under heavy braking. The upper chamber, which connects directly to a bleed port, sits slightly higher and helps catch any air bubbles that rise through the system, making bleeding and maintenance a bit easier. So, first impressions, yeah, it is nicely made. It's all aluminium, and the weight, it is pretty impressive too. So for comparison, the giant conduct faceplate weighs 266 grams, whereas both of these adapters are around half that at 137. Plus that split reservoir design, it is pretty cool. So without getting into loads of detail, among other things, it means it can handle different orientations without trapping air. So keeps the braking consistent even if the adapters are sat at a bit of an angle. But yeah, regardless, great to see on a cheaper kit like this. All right, so I'm actually in a pretty good spot at the moment, made some good progress. So I've got the front and the rear derailleurs all cabled up and good to go, and I can show you them working. So there's the rear, all good, no issues, and the front works fine as well. Now I've run the cable housings or cable outers all the way through the frame rather than using the frame stops. They go all the way to the derailleurs because I find that the shifting is just a lot better, a lot more consistent and reliable that way. And I've also run the hydraulic brake hose for the rear line through the frame, and you would have seen I've actually got sound deadening foam over all 3 of those cables in there, so hopefully I won't get any rattles. And I've done a bit of work up the front here with this. Right, so out the back of the shifter, I've got a little bit of mechanical brake housing here, very short run, so I can get this positioned where I need it. And I've got 2 bleed ports here, and I'm not entirely sure which one to use because I couldn't find any documentation for these, which isn't a massive surprise, honestly. So I think I'll try the bottom one here first. I'll attach a bleed funnel. Right, so this is all plumbed in, and that was very, very straightforward. It uses standard BH59 hydraulic fitting, so absolutely no surprises. That was nice and easy. I just need to bleed it now, right? And the trouble is, now I've plumbed this in, I can't really spin it round. It doesn't want to kind of stay where it is. So I think I'm going to need to turn this bike upside down. So this is what I've ended up with. The bike is obviously upside down, and I've attached a bleed funnel to that port there. I've pushed some oil through, and if I pull the brake lever here, you can see, yeah, all appears to be working. So I think I've evacuated all the air bubbles out. So I'll cap it off and make sure it works.
Right then, really quick sponsor spot. So Siroko, yeah, love these guys. They're a Spanish company that makes some really well-priced cycle gear, and I've worn their stuff on every ride for nearly 5 years at this point. I mean, this jersey is, I think, over 3 years old, and in the summer months, it's basically the only one I wear. So the gear lasts ages, and it washes really well too. So I think Siroko recommends hand washing this thing, but I've always just chucked it in the washing machine with everything else, and it's been fine. But yeah, they do all sorts: bib shorts, cycle socks, glasses, jackets, vests, yeah, everything you need really. And if you use my link, which I've put down there in the video description, it'll get you 10% off the entire site, which is cool. And anything you buy helps me out a little bit as well, which is awesome. So yeah, check them out, and let's get back to it.
Now, it's worth pointing out, with all these cheaper hydraulic kits, there's no proper bleed nipple on the brake caliper. So on a Shimano setup, for example, loosen this about half a turn, it opens up the system to let fluid and air flow through when bleeding, tighten it back up, and it seals the system again. You never have to remove it completely, right? Well, on budget calipers, like these ones, there's no actual bleed nipple. Instead, it's just a threaded port sealed with a small screw, which you have to remove entirely to bleed it. It's cheaper to make this way, but when resealing it, yeah, you've got to be quick to avoid losing fluid or letting air back in. That's what I'm getting done here, so yeah, bear that in mind.
There's a weak sauce. I don't think that's worked, honestly. Just judging by that lever pull, yeah, I think there's definite room for improvement. Okay, let's try again.
So yeah, the brake feel was very spongy. It was no good. I bled it as best I could, but there was definitely still air in the system. So for take 2, I attached the bleed funnel to the other bleed port on the adapter. I was basically pushing oil through the brake line with the syringe on the caliper, filling up the bleed cup and then pushing the oil back through to the syringe with the brake lever by kind of compressing the brake. This seemed to work pretty well, dislodging all the bubbles.
Okay, so that certainly feels a hell of a lot better. So that other bleed port was definitely the one I needed to use. So I think it's properly bled, but I will say, even so, this piston does need to move quite a long way before these pistons bottom out on the brake block here. So that's kind of where it needs to sit, which seems quite far down, but I don't really know. So what I'll do is I'll stick a wheel in, stick some pads on with a disc and see if I can actually compress those pads onto the disc within a reasonable amount of travel of this piston. So let's see if I can, figure this out. Right, with the wheel on the back and the disc and pads in, it feels much, much better. So that's where it bottoms out, and you can see there's still a lot of travel left in that piston there. So we got a little bit to play with. Yeah, I'm happy with it. Now it's all primed and set up. Very, very promising. So let's get the same thing done with the front brake and get that set up.
A few minutes later.
Right, boom, there we go, all sorted. So got the front brake installed. That was pretty straightforward and it feels absolutely fantastic, really solid, no air bubbles at all. So I'm really excited to try that out. That feels nice and solid, and so does the rear brake as well, and it looks a lot tidier than I thought it would initially. Actually, I think this is quite a good place to put it. So I've kind of secured it in place with some zip ties on each side here, and then these kind of Velcro ties, because I wanted it to kind of stay in place, but I wanted it to be relatively easily removable in case of any problems and in case I need to kind of re-bleed it or something. So I might come up with a slightly more permanent solution in the future, but for now, check that out. So next up, I'll get the rest of the bike finished, put some bar tape on, and we'll give this thing a rip, because really excited to try it.
So while I'm getting the rest of the bike together, what's the kind of use case for a kit like this? Well, as far as I see it, there are two main ones. Firstly, you're on rim brake, but fancy upgrading to disc. Normally that means replacing almost everything because not many parts on the bike are interchangeable. But with this kit, you can reuse your entire group set. Let's say you've got a really nice mechanical Ultegra or Dura Ace group set, you can carry that over, right? So rather than buying a whole new bike, you can just get the disc frame, wheels, rotors, transfer everything over, and boom, you're on disc brake. It could also make a pretty decent stopgap in that instance while you save up for like SRAM Red ETAP or Ultegra Di2, something like that. Secondly, if you're currently running traditional mechanical disc brakes, whether that's hybrid hydraulic calipers like these ones here, or fully mechanical calipers like the TRP Spyres, then this IIIPro kit could make a really worthwhile performance upgrade. As mentioned, it's very similar to the Giant Conduct setup, and that was so close to genuine hydraulic performance. I mean, far beyond any mechanical caliper I've tried. Now, don't get me wrong, right? I do have a real soft spot for mechanical disc brakes. I've tried loads of different calipers over the years, but even the best of them couldn't match the kind of stopping power and lever feel of the Giant Conduct setup. So with that in mind, let's see how this IIIPro kit stacks up.
Okay, so just getting the bar tape slapped on here, finishing up the build, and there we go. The bike is complete. I'm really happy with how it's come out. Looks pretty clean with these 60mm deep carbon wheels on, and importantly, the front looks nice and tidy. I was kind of worried it would just be a mess of cables, but with the bar tape on, it is nice and symmetrical, and while it might not kind of win any awards for aesthetics, yeah, it doesn't look too ugly if you ask me. But anyway, the brakes do feel pretty nice front and back, so let's get it on the road. I'm heading to a hill that I normally use for brake testing. It's always really quiet, and hopefully you can see it's nice and long, a few turns in there, but there's a decent runoff at the end in case I face any issues. Now, it's not ideal conditions, a few little damp patches on the road, but yeah, let's give it a go. So doing a few initial brake pulls here, and yeah, almost instantly I could tell things were pretty impressive. With mechanical disc brakes, even with a really good quality compressionless brake housing, I'm used to the lever feeling a bit spongy, and it can take a second for the pads to kind of bite. With these, off the bat, the brake feel is nice and solid, and the pads biting on the disc, yeah, you feel it almost immediately.
Well, holy moly, these are impressive. Yeah, I'm very surprised at how good they are. I'm kind of hesitant to give it like the full beans on the brakes because it's cold, it's a little bit damp out, and it's mega windy. I'm not sure if you can tell, but either way, these will stop you in a hurry. Let's just say that much.
So I gave it a few more runs, getting up to 30, 35 miles an hour before braking, and yeah, it performed great. You can see the rear wheel locks up without much effort, so there's no shortage of power on tap. The overall feel, it isn't quite as sharp or immediate as genuine hydraulic brakes. There's a touch more lever travel and a hint of sponginess, but some of that is probably down to the cheaper shifters I'm using, to be honest. I reckon with a set of like proper Shimano levers, it would feel a bit better. You also have to squeeze a tiny bit harder to reach that top end braking force, but the power and modulation, they're both surprisingly close to what you get from a fully hydro setup. Needless to say, it blows all the mechanical brake calipers I've used out of the water in terms of feel and performance. Yeah, honestly, really cool.
Okay, so I was out yesterday testing out this build, and I was impressed with the braking performance, it has to be said. But this morning, I've realized I think there's something incorrect with the way it's been set up. So essentially, I think these are in the wrong orientation, right? Because underneath this cover, you've got the oil reservoir with those two chambers. That needs to be at the very top of the system so that any air bubbles or anything in the brake lines can work their way up and will end up inside the reservoir. But when it's at 90 degrees like this, I don't think that can happen properly. So basically, I think I need to turn this to make that black cap sit on the top so that the reservoir is at the very top of the system on both sides. So luckily, yeah, I've used kind of a cable tie and this Velcro, so it should be relatively straightforward to turn this over. So I'm gonna get that done now.
So yeah, getting these moved was easy enough. I did have to loosen this connecting nut ever so slightly to rotate them, but I avoided introducing any air bubbles, and yeah, here's the result. I think much better. Now, it probably would have been absolutely fine as it was, but as mentioned several times, I intend to ride this all winter, so I wanted things done properly. Anyway, I took it out again, the brakes felt great, the bike looks good, and the front end is still nice and tidy, so yeah, happy days.
So look, I love weird braking setups. They're always so unique and make for a really interesting build. And yeah, this kit from IIIPro is no exception. It's genuinely really wicked. The performance is just as good as the giant conduct setup for like a third of the price and half the weight. It's the kind of closest you can get to genuine hydraulic disc brake performance with a mechanical group set, no doubt about it. But without getting kind of too wrapped up in how cool I think these little things are, there are definitely some considerations to be aware of. It's not the easiest kit to get installed properly, right? With the giant conduct setup, it bolts onto the front of the stem nice and secure, and cable management is relatively straightforward. With this thing, you've got to find a place for both of those converters to live on the bike. If you look on the AliExpress advert, it actually shows them under the bars, wrapped in the bar tape, which I think looks absolutely dreadful. Some people have put them in line, as I've mentioned, but I don't think this is an ideal placement, honestly. Basically, to get them positioned nice and securely on the handlebars, making sure everything is tidy and symmetrical, can take a little bit of effort. Now, bleeding the brakes wasn't actually too bad once I had them positioned correctly and I'd kind of sorted out the technique, but that can definitely take a little bit of trial and error. And with them positioned here on the bars, I can no longer kind of attach a basic computer mount or a bike light around the handlebars, so I've had to come up with some other methods to get them attached up the front. Lastly, durability is a little bit of an unknown, right? I mean, I've had them on the bike a couple of weeks at this point, no issues at all, but considering the whole unit, including that piston rod, is made out of aluminium rather than any steel parts, and it's hollow to allow that cable to pass through, and presumably the piston seals inside are quite small and delicate, it might not be the most robust thing ever built, if you kind of catch my drift. However, as mentioned, this is going to be my winter training bike, so it's going to get used and abused over the next few months, so I will keep you posted. Bottom line, is the braking performance as good as a genuine hydraulic group set? No, it's not, but it does come pretty close, and it's better than any mechanical disc brake caliper I have ever tested. I mean, for 50 quid, colour me very impressed. Let's just say that much. So I've put some links on AliExpress to that kit down below in the description. Check those out if you're interested. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think, and yeah, see you next time. Ciao.
It's the bonus clip time.
Okay, right, two quick things to bang on the end here. Firstly, the shifting performance on this bike. It's so good. So these micro new 11-speed shifters here, I've had them a number of years and I've used them on a couple of different builds. Every time I get them out and use them, I'm reminded how
good they are. So it's probably helped by the fact that I'm running the gear cable housings all the way through the frame. So I'm not using the cable stops, as I said. And I'm using, Shimano 105 front and rear derailleurs, which probably helps the shifting performance. But yeah, they're just so good. I mean, some of it is probably due to the fact as well that the cables for shifting come out of the side of the shifters in this kind of really old school fashion, which means you don't have kind of sharp corners for them to navigate. So reduces friction, keeps the cable runs nice and smooth. But yeah, either way, the shifting is phenomenal. Might well be the best shifting bike I've actually got in my fleet, to be honest with you. Secondly, I've changed the tires that I'm running on this bike. So I was using 700 by 30C Goodyear Eagle Sport tires, and I really like them actually. They're great value and they've worked well for me over the last year. But hopefully you can see they're a little bit slick, honestly. So considering this is going to be my winter training bike, I wanted something with a little bit more of an aggressive tread pattern. And this is what I've gone for. Look at that nice tan sidewall there. So I've had these ages. I bought them on AliExpress a while ago. These IIIPro dash tires in 700 by 30C, although I'll show you the actual width in a second. But yeah, hopefully you can see almost gravel-esque in their tread pattern. So hopefully that's going to offer a little bit more grip and be a little bit more robust in the kind of crummy conditions I'm going to be using this bike in. So yeah, they're supposed to be 700 by 30, but if you look at this picture, they actually measure closer to 700 by 34 on these particular set of rims, and they clear on the frame, which surprises me actually, because this frame only officially supports up to 700 by 28C. But if I show you, it's relatively tight, but they do clear on the front and then nowhere near the down tube. And then at the back here, at the kind of base of the chainstay, hopefully you can see, it all clears and nothing rubs at all. So yeah, I'm happy. And they certainly look pretty tasty as well. So yeah, this is my winter training machine. And I'm so chuffed with it. I was a bit worried the build was going to be a bit naff, but it's come out so nicely. It looks really nice. The braking is really decent. And like I said, the shifting is super crispy as well. Plus, it's like really, really unique. I guarantee there's no other bike like this in the UK, and there's something quite special about that feeling, you know, building a bike that is completely yours, if you kind of know what I mean. But anyway, enough of that. I'm really going to enjoy using this thing. I just think it's such a sick build. Anyway, do let me know what you think in the comments, and yeah, I'll see you next time.